Jen, thank you for joining us. Welcome everybody to our Night Vision event, our fireside chat with Jen Easterly. I'll introduce her in just a minute. Jen, thank you so much for your service coming in here. So proud of all the administration's work. I got so many questions to ask you, and we'll get to that in just a minute. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Dave DeWalt. I'm the founder of NightDragon, which coincidentally comes named after a famous cybersecurity attack. Maybe I could ask Jen about, but we're a dedicated investment and advisory firm, and we invest into companies that really solve a threat or a major risk in the world. And we focus in on cyber safety, security, and privacy, right? Key areas where Jen focuses with her role at CISA. And I'm really honored to have her. Again, I have a big background in cyber as well, 20 plus years working with the government. And I will tell you, it's such an honor to have Jen here on the call. I was CEO of McAfee, where we did a lot of work together. I was then CEO of FireEye and Mandiant, and just kind of grew up with the domain of cyber and all the threats and risks in it. And was really excited to have Jen come and join today, and look forward to it. So Jen, I'm going to embarrass you for a minute and do a little bio, because you are one of the coolest, baddest ass people. And I just want to cite it a little bit, hence AC/DC here as well as our warm up. For those who don't know Jen, you can see a couple pictures here. She is a woman of many, many talents. If you don't know, graduate of West Point, master's degree from Oxford, Rhodes Scholar. I mean, right there, I should stop, because amazing 20 plus years in the Army, intelligence and cyber operations. I mean, just amazing tours of duty. I got to get them right here in Haiti, the Balkans, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Two-time recipient of the Bronze Star, Jen. Thank you for your service with that. Helped stand up the Army's first cyber battalion, and also was instrumental in design and creation of our U.S. Cyber Command. So pretty amazing. Also the NSA's Deputy for Counterterrorism, Special Assistant to President Obama, and Senior Director for Counterterrorism. And the list goes on, just amazing. But most importantly as well, you went to the private sector, and you also work for Morgan Stanley, one of my favorite banks, who took my companies public many times. And I know you ran all the resilience for the bank as well. So incredible experience, both in the public sector, the private sector, and now returning as well, just recently, or about 100 days or so into your role here at CISA. But I know in the background, you've got some cool things. I hear you can play the piano, you can do a Rubik's Cube in like 2 minutes. Are you kidding me? You've got, this giant shark behind you, you gotta tell me about, and some really cool things. I know you're a mother as well, and just thank you for your service. But before we go there, should we compare t-shirts? I have the Foo Fighters on me. What do you got on you? I gotta know.
I know. Well, like I told you, I just came from another 2 events, but I have my peace, love, and rock and roll shirt on. So,
love it.
Which, as you reminded me, is a little like Elvis Costello's peace, love, and understanding. Not necessarily the hard rock that I'm typically listening to, but still good music.
I know you came onto the stage. You were one of my favorite ever presenters, by the way. And over my years, Jen, I used to always come on stage and I would do rock and roll or sing something. Or one time I did a hang glider into a stadium.
Ooh,
another time I did a bungee jump off the rafters and did these silly things. And I know you came on kind of your virtual dancing to AC/DC for Black Hat. There's some of the cool things I've done, not to compare to you. You've always did it.
Oh, dude.
One time I rode a horse, Jen, on the stage. I was scared out of my mind. And another time I threw out the first pitch at an Oakland A's game. And of course I one-hopped it to the catcher and embarrassed everybody as a result of that. So my talents aren't quite the same as yours, but thank you for all your work you're doing. Hey, listen, I know it's been about 100 days, maybe to a serious note for a minute, and you've got confirmed, you got a lot going on. At least as I see it, like what an 18 months we've had, what a 20 years we've had in the cyber domain, Jen. And I'd love to ask you your big picture views on kind of, you got parachuted into this role, kind of how do you see what's going on? Maybe a couple comments to start just about threat landscape, the world you see, kind of your role, and then I'll ask you more about your priorities. And your past week was pretty busy too. So tell me big picture, what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, well, first of all, Dave, it is great to be with you, my friend. And I think we're gonna have to figure out when we can do a keynote together so we could like skydive in. Are you with me?
You
Or
have
we
to
could
teach me to
rappel it.
dance better first, okay?
That's
I
right.
need,
Yeah,
yeah.
my Elaine dance is look.
There you go.
I have I do goofy things all the time.
Love it.
No pride. Yeah, so it's a great question, right? Because you can look back. We've been in this business for a while, but over the past year, cybersecurity has really become a kitchen table issue. It is really what everybody is talking about. And I think two things there. First of all, ransomware, which has become a scourge, and some of that has been exacerbated by everybody working at home in less secure spaces. But also these attacks against critical infrastructure that are having real impacts on the everyday lives of Americans. And so when I think about the threat landscape, I kind of, in my mind, think about three things. The first is what I like to call the Dirk Gently paradigm, because I'm a fan of Douglas Adams. I know, you and I are like of the same generation. Nobody else is going to get this probably, but
They're all Googling it right now. Yes.
exactly. A holistic detective agency, right? Everything is connected. So everything is connected now. Everything is interdependent. Everything is therefore vulnerable and hackable. We now live in a world of 7.8 billion people, right? 5.2 billion of them are on mobile phones, 4.7 on the internet, 4.3 on social media. We have about 21 billion devices connected to the internet, and that's a number that's going to grow to about 50 billion in the coming few years. The first website, you'll remember, went live in 1991. It's now 1.8 billion websites, right? So increasing digitization of the world, volume, variety, velocity of data, there's been goodness in that, but it's increased the attack surface in a massive way. And so again, greater vulnerabilities. So you have 10% of those websites that lead you to malware. We have cybercrime damages in trillions of dollars. And again, we have this ransomware that's being used against vulnerable critical infrastructure, hospitals, schools, municipalities. It really is affecting our everyday lives. And so that connectivity in many ways has made us more vulnerable. I think the other thing that I think about, Dave, and we get concerned about nation state actors because they are the most well-resourced, most sophisticated: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. But there's really been this blending, this hybridization between nation state actors and cyber criminals that have really upped their game because of the democratization of cyber intrusion capabilities that have really kind of eliminated barriers to entry, right? And so you now have, take ransomware again, the word on everybody's lips, so we can talk about something else, but ransomware now has this ecosystem where you have the malware developers, you have the help desk people, you have the dashboard operators, you have those who broker access, and all it takes to be part of that ecosystem is a little bit of money. And so there is way too little friction in this system. And it's why we're doing some of the things that we're doing across the administration, and in particular at CISA. And the last thing I'd say is, in addition to connectivity and the democratization and proliferation of weapons, is just the complexity of everything. We're both tech people, and as the world has become increasingly digitized, it's become increasingly complex. So, we now see criminal intrusions that are enabled by vulnerabilities in software and hardware that underpin, our way of life, essentially. And then with respect to critical infrastructure, they're in power plants, they're in dams, they're in medical devices, they're in automobiles, they're in weapons systems. And some of these things are difficult to identify, difficult to upgrade, difficult to patch, and they can cause significant impacts, including loss of life if they're ever exploited by an adversary. And, that's why, and I know we'll talk about priorities, but that's why in a lot of ways, we are very focused on what we call foundational improvements in the technology ecosystem, which, as you well know, is not something that government can do alone. This has to be part of our collective defense strategy. But it's why we're working very hard on adopting things like SBOM, like the software bill of materials, hardware bill of materials, to help secure the supply chain. But when you think about just the weaponization of data, the complexity, the connectivity, the democratization of tools, it shows you why we absolutely have to make cybersecurity a national security priority. So I'm excited to be in this job at this point in time because there's a lot of work to do, but it's got to be a partnership with the private sector.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, Jen, if we can. I thought you hit on some great points I'd love to dissect for a second. Like I said, I've been in this market for 20 years myself, and I've been calling it the same term for 20 years. Those who have seen me do keynotes, I call it the perfect storm. And you just almost articulated it. It's like this confluences of events that is creating this inertia of this domain called cyber. And speed of technology and innovation, all the resulting vulnerabilities from all that speed of innovation. You then throw geopolitical tensions on top of it, anonymity of the internet on top of that. And the defense is having a hard time keeping up, and the offense gets a lot of opportunity here. And then the offense has just grown and grown and grown. And you alluded to it, and I've always called it what I call 3 S's. It's like what I call sourced directly from a nation state, sheltered from a nation state, or a shell organization of a nation state, all intertwined now, creating the ability to understand attribution at a whole nother level than we've had. You mentioned a little bit of public-private partnership, and I want to talk about that because this is an area of pride for me for many years of working with the government. I know this is a big initiative for you, and the launch of the JCDC, and maybe just tell everybody, exactly what that is and maybe how you see a vision for that for a second. And let's talk public-private partnership if you could.
Yeah, for sure. I spent 27 years in government before I went off to the private sector for 4.5 years at Morgan Stanley. I went off there to actually build from scratch their cyber defense center, so the center of gravity for cyber operations, and then became the head of firm resilience. And I will tell you, those 4.5 years, Dave, were the best preparation and the most important preparation for this job. Because if you haven't been able to look back from the private sector at the government and see how the government doesn't always look like it has its act together, I always joke that even me, who'd been in government for so long, sometimes felt like I needed a PhD to figure out what was happening and who we were supposed to be receiving signal from. Different types of reports. You'd get something from CISA, something from NSA, something from FBI. And that's one of the things that I am so passionate about changing, is making sure that the government is dealing with the private sector in a much more coherent, coordinated way. And I think that there are a bunch of things that we can do. And we're really at this moment in time where I think we have the right team of folks who know each other, who trust each other, who are not about wearing the t-shirt, they're about wearing the shirt for Team America. And it's not about turf or territory or drama or ego. It's about getting the mission done, because we realize if you have to beat one of us, you really should have to beat all of us. And so that's sort of the Chris Inglis bumper sticker that I've stolen from him, but I love it, right? Because it's a one team, one fight. And as a retired Army officer, I love that stuff. But so the JCDC, and I've been asked, how is this different from all of the other crazy acronym soup that the government has?
I'm still learning all the government acronyms, Jen.
Right, man. I'll help you. I know it is. It's terrible, right? The first thing I'd say is it's a much cooler acronym, JCDC, right? Like I wanted to call it the Advanced Cyber Defense Collaborative, but the lawyers had a little bit of an issue with that on the branding side. So JCDC, well, what is it? It was a great idea that came out of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, which has been one of the more effective commissions that the government has done. Why? Because they had a bunch of legislators on there, 2 senators, 2 congressmen, to actually make sure that recommendations got instantiated in law. And that's a big deal. And frankly, CISA benefited from a lot of things that were in the defense bill earlier this year, and what I hope will be in the defense bill coming up in the next couple months. So the Solarium Commission had this idea of a joint cyber planning office. And JICPO, by the way, is not a great sounding acronym. But the legislation actually talked about more than just planning, talked about exercising, creating a common operating picture, and then doing integrated cyber defense operations. So 3 things why the JCDC is different and unique and why I'm very optimistic about it. Thing one, it's the only cyber entity in the federal government that brings together the full power of the federal cyber ecosystem in law, right? CISA, FBI, NSA, Cybercom, DOD, DOJ, ODNI, and then we have Secret Service and the National Cyber Director. The only place that brings together talents, powers, authorities, capabilities. And that's a big deal, particularly when you're trying to figure out who to go to. That's almost your one-stop shop for cyber defense. Second, it's about planning. You know, as a retired military officer, I often say I like to quote dead generals. So Eisenhower talked about plans are nothing, planning is everything. And we all know when bad things happen, you know, we go to the sound of the guns, right? Everybody does heroic things and we figure out how to do incident response. We're pretty good at that. But being proactive and planning and getting everybody into a room and actually putting plans on the shelf against our most serious threats to the nation and then exercising them so that we know in peacetime what we need to do in wartime, that is a big differentiator. So it's the planning piece. And then finally, look at the plank holder partners. We were very deliberate about who we chose as the plank holders for the JCDC. And I'll tell you, Dave, we had like 150 entities reach out to us, and we're still going through how we're going to build out
more too.
partnerships. Yeah, dude. So we chose the cloud service providers, the internet service providers, the infrastructure companies, and the cybersecurity vendors. Why? Because we were trying to solve the blind spot issue, the visibility issue, the I can't see the dots issue. You don't want the intel community to see the dots on domestic infrastructure. What you do want is a partnership between the federal government and private industry that has incredible visibility by virtue of being the technology platform and can provide us information about trends and incidents in an anonymized way that protects privacy, but gives us an ability to see those dots, connect those dots, and because of that infrastructure, to drive down risk at scale. So those are three reasons why I'm incredibly optimistic that we can actually make some traction. And, you know, it's only been whatever it is. I mean, I announced this thing in August, so it's been maybe like 2.5 months, but we're already seeing dividends being paid by having those partners shoulder to shoulder. It's not just about partnership. The last thing I'll say, turn it back to you, is I'm trying to shift the paradigm from the hackneyed term of public-private partnership to public-private operational collaboration. So it's not just information sharing for information sharing's sake, it's information sharing to enable a network defender to be able to do something with data that'll allow them to increase the security and resilience of the data. And that means timely, relevant, and actionable. And so that's really the paradigm shift that we are trying to motivate here. And I've been incredibly pleased that we've had the private sector be, you know, already awesome partners.
Jen, it's music to all of our ears, and I know we have a lot of professionals on this, and we'll hear the streaming later as well. You know, one man's view here is, you know, we almost have the cyber dream team in place, right? With yourself and Chris and with Ann Newberger and the inertia that you all have, and now the formation of the JCDC, and not just, you know, like I said, you know, you're creating plans, you're operationalizing those plans and unifying everybody together, because this takes a village, right? This is a complicated domain, and it is a very important domain for the world. So we appreciate that. I know you've had a really busy week as well. And if we could, Sarah, maybe flash up, if you would, some of the imperatives that you've outlined for the audience to listen to. We've talked a little bit about sort of the left upper side, public-private partnerships, but I know there's a few more here that are really important, including some recent things this past week around a BOD, which you might want to explain what it is and how important that is as well for the audience. I think that's a major step in a direction we haven't seen before.
For sure. And I have the CISA Rubik's Cube, by the way. When I come out to visit you, I will bring you one.
I'm going to have to practice my Rubik's Cube now. And if I can get it done within 2 days, I'll instead of 2 minutes.
Awesome. We'll do a showdown. So let me talk about, yeah, it has been a busy week. So yesterday I was up on the Hill with my teammate and great friend, Chris Inglis, who's our National Cyber Director, speaking to the House Homeland Committee. So Chairman Thompson, Representative Katko, and I will tell you what is so encouraging, particularly in a moment in time where things feel very partisan, cybersecurity is a completely bipartisan issue, and it's incredibly encouraging. And so when we talk to those committees, it is, what can we do to help? Which is great, right? Because they are all in. And again, moment in time, and it's very rare. So exciting to be up there. And everything that is on there are things that we talked about. How do you staff up the mission and transform CISA to be the agency the nation deserves? What are our challenges in workforce and talent development? How do we improve our capabilities? One of the things that I think is incredibly important, and maybe I'll come back and ask for your help with, and other folks that are on here, I really want to ignite the research community. And that's what I was trying to do at Black Hat, right? There is such incredible power out there. Researchers, academics, hackers, people that are finding these vulnerabilities and reporting them through coordinated vulnerability disclosure programs that I just think are heroic, right? Because they're helping to make the whole ecosystem safer and more secure. So I want to ignite that community, because that's how I think we rebalance the defense over the offense, frankly, right? So you don't have mercenaries out there finding these 0 days and selling them for a ton of money. And so I worry about that, right? Because they can get into some pretty bad hands. But one of the things that we published yesterday that I'm super excited about is what we call a BOD, another wonderful government acronym. So BOD means Binding Operational Directive, and it was an authority that we got as part of the Federal Information Security Modernization Act in 2014. And essentially what this allows us to do is to put out a tasking to all of the departments and agencies across the federal civilian executive branch, so 102 departments and agencies, telling them that they need to take action to remediate vulnerabilities that have been actively exploited by threat actors. Now, we all know there are a ton of vulnerabilities out there, right? But if you look at the 18,000 in 2020, only 4% were actively exploited. So when you're a network defender and you're seeing these criticals and highs and the CVSS scores and all that, you're like, oh, we got to knock them all out. But when you have an ability to prioritize what you're remediating by what has been actively exploited, that's really powerful. And so what we said is actively exploited vulnerabilities, 108 of them, this year have to be remediated in 2 weeks. And then those before 2021, because they get more complicated in how they have to make some changes and allocate resources, they get a bit more time, they get 6 months. But this is the first time that we've set those deadlines for both internet-facing and non-internet-facing vulnerabilities. Now, this is just what we call the FSEV. It's so annoying to talk in acronyms. I'm going to try hard not to, but it's basically the .gov. But it sends a signal, because at the end of the day, this goes out publicly, and it's a signal to critical infrastructure owners and operators. It's a signal to state and local. It's a signal to small and medium enterprises. This is something that you should be doing as well. Hugely important. And again, we're excited about it because we want to partner with the communities of folks who are out there bringing us information on these vulnerabilities, because we are going to close them. So really, really important, really exciting.
By the way, I can't agree more, Jen. I mentioned this before, being a CEO of FireEye, we found so many 0 days during my time because we had invented, basically virtual machines that ran in the network, and we could see 0 days and we could see the exploits occurring. But then when we put it out to sort of the community, they didn't know amongst the thousands of patches that they had to do in a week, which ones were critical. And which ones really were important to patch and to get in place. So the BOD, I think, is an amazing step in the right direction. Speaking of another acronym, which is kind of odd, I hate to say it, but it's called SICI, I think. It's called, is it Systematically Important Critical Infrastructure? And I know you didn't name that, but I know over time, we've had like 16 critical infrastructures, then sort of the Section 9 areas during the Obama administration, now sort of the SICI designation. And I know you are trying to identify key targets that are important for these BODs as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you're identifying them, what ones you've talked about publicly?
Yeah, absolutely. So the bonds are only for federal civilian, but again, it's a signaling. When we talk about critical infrastructure owners and operators, those entities within the private sector, of course, that's 85% of critical infrastructure. And that's why trusted partnerships are so foundational to everything that we're doing, because that really is a collective defense mission. But SICI, and I said this when I was on the Cyberspace Learning Commission Red Team, it's just a terrible sounding acronym. I mean, I just think we can do better, right? We just can do better. And
Yeah.
so, but the concept is very good. The concept is there are a ton of critical infrastructure owners and operators out there, 16 sectors, Section 9 firms. Some are designated, some we don't have Section 9 designated across all infrastructure sectors. But what we need to do is be able to identify those entities that are absolutely critical to the national security, economic prosperity, and to our public health and safety. And that is not everybody, right? Because if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. And so think about this: if there is some sort of a major attack, it's what do we need? We talk about those sectors, and we call things lifeline sectors, and that's water and energy and comms and transportation. So we need a way to slice what we're calling not SICI, but Pisces, because it sounds cooler, right? And I like fish and stuff. But it's a primary systemically important entities, so Pisces. And what it is, it's a list. And Dave, I haven't seen the final one. The team is working hard on the methodology, but also what those entities will be. And I think it should be probably, a couple hundred at the most. And so these are the ones, and the way we're doing it is economic centrality, network centrality, and logical dominance in what we call the national critical functions. Because yes, traditionally we look at sectors, but at the end of the day, as I said, my first point, Dirk Gently, right? Everything is connected, everything is interdependent. And so we could spend $1 billion at Morgan Stanley on cybersecurity, but if the power went down and the telcos went down, it's like, hey man, we're out of luck. And so you have to think of things functionally, not just by sector. And that's what we've done. We have lensed it through 55 national critical functions. And so we're going to look at the dominance in those functions. And I think we'll come up with 100, maybe a couple hundred of these systemically important entities. So whether it ends up in legislation or not, we're going to move forward on this analysis because I think it's incredibly important. We're, of course, working with the sector risk management agencies across the federal government. We're working with the private sector, but we really need to understand that. And then what the Congress is thinking about is what are the benefits you get if you're a Pisces entity? What are the burdens that you have if you're a Pisces entity? Because as you know, life is all about incentives. And really, technology is easy, people are hard, cybersecurity is about humans. And so it's incentives, right?
Pisces is a whole lot better and it's easier to remember. So I'll remember that. Hey, let me pull in the thread a little bit on vulnerabilities because this past year has been incredibly enlightening to our supply chain, particularly in software assurance and made notable by SolarWinds and other attacks that we've seen. And I know in May we had an executive order, I think it was Section 4, that kind of laid out some of the areas of software assurance. The work I do with NSTAC, we've been working on some subcommittee work with software assurance, trying to really identify, create standards with NIST around better software assurance, particularly with cloud development now that's completely rapid. It's very dynamic. And our supply chain of humans and software that's open sourced, it's a very complex problem. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what can we do to get our arms around this? You agree it's a big problem, and what do you think about supply chain and software assurance in that area?
Yeah, I mean, it is a big problem. And you guys on the NSTAC have done some really good work. And, coming out of the executive order, and we maybe should talk a little bit more about that because I'm a huge fan of that, probably the most technical and aggressive executive order. And my folks at CISA worked hard on our portions of that. We had 35 tasks that either we led or we were a part of, and we're getting after it in a really positive way. But there were NIST taskers on, as you said, software assurance, software supply chain. And our goal is to really figure out how to operationalize this. And so while better visibility and strong controls are necessary, long-term change in securing the supply chain is going to be about design. I think it's going to be about building in and deploying more secure technology at the end of the day. And so we've been working with NIST to define those software products that are uniquely critical in the supply chain and developing steps to minimize associated risks. And, part of what I think that's going to implicate is the need for a very clear understanding of those trust relationships in an environment, and taking steps to minimize or lock down those trust relationships. And so that's a big piece of what we've been doing. We're also driving adoption of, as I mentioned earlier, the software bill of materials, which I think will make a real difference. It's not going to solve everything, but it will help improve software development practices and enabling further visibility into potential risks from embedded libraries and components. And so it's a tough problem, right? But we are working on this very hard because at the end of the day, it goes back to my connectivity point. We can all invest a ton of resources and money into securing our own networks, but we are very dependent on a variety of vendors. And it is not entirely clear that they are incentivized to ensure that they are doing the same to ensure the security and resilience. And so a lot of this is bake it in, build it in, start from design principles.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Again, watching the supply chain, particularly in software, is kind of one of my worst fears, just because of all the knowledge I have, with the work I do. But you're saying it the right way. Visibility matters in security, right? What you can't see, you can't defend. So the SBOM initiatives are important. Identifying the software components, all of the components, creating some standards that we can use. These are all the right things for us to do. One of the things that we focus on here, Jen, at NightDragon, is we look for the biggest threats. We look for the biggest risks. Supply chain is one area, as you know, that we do a lot of work on. But I'd like to ask you a question about other domains that are kind of tangential to cyber traditionally, as we think about our network. I mean, this could be space, it could be cryptocurrency, industrial networks. What new areas of domains are kind of areas you're focused on and worried about? And what areas can the private sector too help you with there, as we now watch the race of AI and quantum and cloud and crowdsourcing intelligence, come to a whole nother level? The private sector is innovating with billions and billions of dollars of capital right now. How we can work together really could matter over time. What keeps you up at night on new stuff coming, and what areas could we help with there?
Yeah. Well, my saying, it's not what keeps me up at night, it's what gets me up in the morning, right? And
Love
that's
it.
because I'm blessed with a job that I love. But I think that list that you just went through is the right one. So first of all, cloud, very important. And that was also in the executive order, is the move to secure cloud. We recently published a secure cloud technical reference architecture, as well as a zero trust maturity model. And that's another way to deal with supply chain, is make sure that you have a segmented architecture, so you can minimize the blast damage from an attack. But cloud is obviously something that we are moving towards building. We need to lead by example here. We are moving the FSEB into a secure cloud environment that we believe is going to make it safer. And of course, private industry is all over this. A lot of these things came from the good ideas of private industry. The other thing that was in there was endpoint detection and response, and so deploying EDR technology throughout the FSEB. The things that I would love to have a conversation with the private sector on is data and analytics. So we have the gift of data, right? Because we run big programs like Einstein and continuous diagnostics and monitor and mitigation. And so we have a ton of data from the federal civilian executive branch. We're going to be getting more data as we instantiate EDR and we start our persistent hunt on federal civilian networks. We are now getting object level, so more granular data from throughout the .gov, and that's only going to increase again as we instantiate EDR. So that's one sort of set of data. The other data that we're going to be getting in, if the legislation goes through, is cyber incident reporting data, structured differently, obviously, but it's all a data problem for me, because at the end of the day, yes, we need to figure out how we respond to some of that data, but I also want to be able to run analytics continuously on that data to be able to understand trends and get ahead of malicious activity. Now, this was something when I was in Morgan Stanley that was one of the most exciting things, as we built from scratch as part of the Fusion Center, a cyber analytics capability to enable us to really make sense of the huge amounts of data that we were collecting across our global networks. And what I want to do is, we're building, and a lot of this is all commercial products, but we need to build an analytic capability as part of our mission support environment. And so it would be great to have discussions about how to enable us to most effectively make sense of that data and ensure that it is enriched with data that we may be getting in from the private sector as we continue to build out our relationships. One of the things in the NDAA is what's called the joint cyber or joint collaborative environment. So you can think of that as sort of the data lake that may underpin the JCDC. And so as we start bringing in more data, we want to make sure that we have an ability to integrate it and correlate it and enrich it so that we can really make sense of it. And as you know, a lot of that will be how do we leverage some of the more advanced artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms. And so I'm excited about all of that. And then the other thing that we are doing some work on is quantum, post-quantum, and what we need to do to get prepared for that type of world. And there's a lot of thought being put into it really at the department level, but we're doing some risk analysis in our National Risk Management Center. And so, but again, like being 4.5 years at Morgan Stanley, and because they took, Morgan Stanley took you guys public, there's incredible amounts of innovation there. And so, and that's just one of, a gazillion out there. And so I'm very excited about being able to tap back into the imagination, the ingenuity, the power of the private sector as we figure out how we can effectively collaborate for the betterment of the nation.
I love it, Jen. I mean, I've watched now the last 2-3 years being an investor and advisor to some of the biggest companies, just the speed of innovation we now have around, I just call it cloud, crowd, and AI, right? So we now have, hyperscale cloud capabilities. We now have crowdsourced, crowd-empowered intelligence. And we have it all underpinned with AI. And we now have sensors in space. We have sensors in high altitude UAVs. We've got on the ground intelligence. The commercial ecosystem of intelligence in the private sector is incredibly powerful right now. And the big data problems are getting solved is really creating an opportunity for the village to get stronger together. So we only have about 100 questions that came in, so I'm going to pick a few, but let's do
the hard ones.
Let's do a fun one first because it caught my eye, which is I've been dying to ask you because I've been staring at this shark behind you now for 40 minutes. It says, Jen, please share the shark story as you did with the conference last week, the 11th annual Cybersecurity Summit. So what is that shark back there?
So the shark comes with me everywhere. The shark was a birthday present from my beloved spouse. But the backstory on the shark is that, I was in the Army for 21 years. And my first duty assignment as a young lieutenant was in the 25th Infantry Division at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, where I lived up on the North Shore on Pipeline Beach, where MTV used to set up for the surf competitions. Could go down, walk down to the beach, do some scuba diving from the shore, really bad longboard surfing, but I love everything Hawaii, and I love the sea, and I love animals of the sea. And so my husband saw this at an antique store sitting on a skateboard, and he got it for me many, many years ago, and the shark comes with me everywhere. So
couldn't you get a nice little dolphin or a tuna? Does it have to be a menacing shark? Like, okay.
It's actually not that menacing. Actually, it is a little menacing. It's very Jaws-like, and the teeth are sharp, actually. The funny thing is it's got a bar. That's how basically you put it over, remember like Saturday Night Live, like Land Shark?
Right, yes, okay.
That's the Halloween costume.
I got it. Oh, gosh. Okay, maybe to a couple serious questions if we could, and answer them as best you can. But we had a big last couple days with the elections, 30 plus states, a lot going on. obviously no political question, but as you think about CISA's role in the elections and perhaps the future elections as well, we've learned a lot in 2016, and at least I did in my various roles, and again in 2020, and information war and what's going on with the social media platforms and things like that. What could you talk a little bit about CISA's role in election security and any directions and improvements that you're thinking about as we move into 2022 and then 2024?
So hugely important, right? I mean, the foundation of democracy are fair and free elections. And so in 2016, I think it was actually 2017 at the beginning of the year, CISA, DHS, that was delegated to CISA, was made the sector risk management agency for election infrastructure. Now, as we know, state and local run all the elections. The federal government doesn't run elections. And so there was a lot of skepticism and suspicion and frankly pushback when it looked like the federal government was trying to get involved in state and local elections. And to the credit of my predecessor and great friend, Chris Krebs, who I think did a marvelous job in forging very collaborative, very productive relationships with secretaries of state, Republican, Democrat, local election officials, just did a fabulous job of working with them to ensure that they had the resources, the technical assistance, the threat information to enable them to do everything they can to ensure the security and resilience of their election infrastructure. And it was kind of amazing, Dave. One of the first things I did when I took this job was I went out to Des Moines, Iowa, never been there before, thought I was going to go to the state fair and then didn't get to go. So next year I'll have to go see the butter statue of Elvis. It's very disappointing.
By the way, that's the wrestling capital of the world out there in Iowa, and I was a wrestler in college, so I've been to Des Moines many times.
That's right. Okay,
we can compare notes on that one.
Well, we'll have to. I want pictures of the Elvis butter statue. So went out there, and I will tell you, met with all of the secretaries of state, and to a person, they were all incredibly grateful, and I can't take any credit for all of the support that CISA provided. So those relationships are really, really strong. And so we're going to continue to do everything we can to support. We set up an elections operations room with our partners at state and local election officials, vendors, folks from the NSC, folks from the Postal Service. And so we just had that room, and, thankfully there were no incidents during the elections. But we are there to support. And one of the, I've made a lot of great hires. You mentioned my awesome chief of staff, Kirsten Todd, but I am particularly excited about the person who's going to come on to replace Matt Masterson, who was Chris Krebs' election security lead. And that's going to be Kim Wyman, the Washington Secretary of State. She's actually giving up her elected job because she realizes how important this is to the nation to be our senior election security lead. And so she's been an election official for decades. She's got the expertise, the experience, the relationships. And oh, by the way, she's a Republican. But much like me, she is in this not as a partisan person, but to ensure that our elections are run in a free and fair way and are secure. So I am very, very excited to welcome her. The one other point that I would make is, I worry a lot about misinformation and disinformation with respect to how it affects elections, but more broadly on the critical infrastructure mission, whether it's COVID, whether it's 5G. And so one of the things that Chris did was he set up this rumor control site last year, and it's not about counter messaging, and it's not about pushing back on alternative facts. It's really just about making sure that the facts are out there. At the end of the day, if there are rumors, it's making sure that the American people have facts. And I happen to believe, as our second president, John Adams, said, facts are stubborn things. I know many people say we live in a post-truth world, but I believe in facts. As a mom, I'm sure as a parent, misinformation and disinformation is a really worrying thing. So we are providing the facts so that people can make the best decisions. And as I've said publicly, and as we did over the past few days, we're going to continue to run the rumor control site. And I'll tell you, those election officials all asked me, are you going to continue to do it? Please do, because it's been incredibly helpful. So, really important mission, and I'm excited about continuing to do it.
Well, congratulations on the hire as well. That's exciting news, and very welcome for us all. Let me ask you another question. A lot of questions coming in here, and This one's kind of a big topic, but I'd love to hear your views on it. I think back when I was CEO for almost 20 years of public companies, there was a seminal moment in accounting that created a lot of standards. And that was, during the WorldCom Enron era where Sarbanes-Oxley came along. And I think I have a tattoo that says 302, 906, 404 on my arm, just from all the years, because we learned what material weaknesses were, significant deficiencies, and the world of accounting and revenue based accounting is very standard. But when you think of the world of cyber and all the crises, we don't really have the notion of standards and metrics and scoring and ratings that perhaps we do in the world of accounting. Do you ever see a world now with innovation getting to the point where we can do outside in assessments, inside out assessments? We can really get a sense of our attack surface, our vulnerabilities, our efficiencies. We could create ratings from the NIST standards and almost evaluate people on their hygiene and responsibility. Do you see a world where ratings could enter into this almost like we did in the world of accounting?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to. So I set myself a little bit of a tough challenge, but I did it very purposefully. When I came in, our mission was to understand and manage risk to our cyber and physical infrastructure. We updated it with my senior leadership team to understand, manage, and reduce risk, right? I don't want to just be in the business of managing risk. I want to be in the business of helping to reduce that risk. But the holy grail question is, how do you measure reduction of risk, right? We came across this in the private sector all the time. You're telling me I need to invest hundreds of millions, $1 billion, and what am I getting? The absence of, how do you prove that the absence of things is worth all that investment? How do you measure it? And so it's one of the reasons why we're doing this development of a rigorous methodology on how we can actually define national critical functions, how we decompose them down to assets and systems, and then how can we define the most important entities within those national critical functions, so we can really get to how you can measure risk by applying risk-based standards. And so it's the putting the rigorous methodology in place, and part B, developing those standards. It was actually a tasking that we got from the National Security Council through a national security memorandum that essentially says that we need to develop in coordination with our NIST partners performance goals and standards. The first ones we released in September for ICS, for industrial control systems. And now we're working across sectors to lay out those baseline standards, because you need to have something to point to. Now, we want you to be above the baseline, and we know, finance is very good, electricity is pretty good, but there are many sectors out there that don't have the resources or the knowledge, and some of them are really small. The way the water community is, they're these very small entities. And so we want to make sure that we are able to signal what right looks like. And of course, it's going to be different per sector. We're going to work consultatively, but you need to have that baseline so you can get to, how do I measure what good looks like? And by no means is this an easy thing. So it's going to take a lot of work, and it needs to be consultative, but boy, oh boy, we got to get it done.
Yeah, agree, and appreciate those thoughts on that. Another question coming in, kind of common theme here has been, we track at NightDragon, I think, over almost 4,000 cyber companies now. It's just amazing. I call it the golden age of cyber, at least from an investing point of view, an evaluation point of view, and an importance point of view. 4,000 cyber companies, and more of those cyber companies aren't built in America. They're companies innovating all over the world. In fact, a lot of people didn't realize, FireEye was born and raised out of Pakistan, and the founders came from Lahore, Pakistan, but we were able to bring that technology into America, vet it properly, sell it to the government, work with the government. There's a lot of Israeli capabilities, Indian technology all over the world. In fact, more and more, this innovation's coming outside. But one of the frustrations these companies have is, like, how do we work with the US government? How do I, these 4-letter words, which aren't 4-letter words, FedRAMP, and things that, we got to get vetted in order to sell. And, I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but, one of the areas of public-private partnership is just making it easier for us all to work with the government too. If you're American and you're vetted, that's one thing, but if you're foreign and you're not vetted, it's a whole nother thing, even though you might have really important technology. So any
Right.
thoughts on how we can work on that together?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is tough. I mean, it is hard to navigate necessarily the government bureaucracy, even if you are an American company, even if you are somebody who is trying to actually just get help from the government as opposed to sell something to the government. And so, with as far as what CISA does, is we have a whole vendor engagement team that is dedicated to having discussions with vendors about their capabilities. And we are, by the way, I should emphasize, we are vendor agnostic, right? We are best of breed in what can actually make a difference to help defend the nation. And so, and I don't usually get involved in those discussions, at least at first. But I have a lot of vendors that reach out to me, Dave. And so I should say CISA vendor engagement.
There you
Send
go.
a note to them. And at least that's the place to go to start those discussions, because you're right. I mean, there is innovation and creativity all over the world. And we want to make sure that we're making the best use of all of the creativity and innovation happening across the technology landscape.
Well, Jen, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I just want to again say, listen, thank you for your service. Thank you for all the hard work you're putting in, coming back from private sector, which was been hard to come to the CISA role. But like you said, it's not what keeps you up at night, it's what get you up in the morning. I love that statement. I'm going to copy that as well. And, we really appreciate everything you're doing. I would really love to invite you out to Silicon Valley at some point and have you come out. There's just so much happening here. I drove my car across the country 30 some years ago from where I grew up on the East Coast, and I haven't really ever gone back because it's the world of innovation and there's a lot happening here. So love to welcome you out here or come out here in some way, and I love to bring you. So
Yeah.
Open invitation for you if you'd take it.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to getting out there. I think it's incredibly important to be able to build out. We've got a lot of them from my time, obviously, but continue to build and strengthen those relationships. One thing I should say before we sign off is we actually have a field force in 10 regions around the country. So we have folks in California, in all the states, and they are there really to be our tip of the spear, to work with state and local and to work with companies and critical infrastructure owners and operators. So I've got some folks on the ground there, so I'll come out and visit them and look forward to spending some time with you. We'll get our skydiving act together for our keynote.
Well, I'll look for concerts that are happening during a week and we'll go to a rock concert together. How's that?
Awesome.
Gotta be
I will.
something.
I'll bring out the electric guitar.
There you go. Perfect. Jen Easterly, thank you for all your service, and thank you everybody for attending. We've had a whole series of these, Jen, these Night Vision fireside chats. I so appreciate your candor, your hard work, everything. Sarah, if you'd put up there, we have another session of Night Vision coming up here in a couple of weeks, which I'm excited about as well. December 14th, we have Dmitry Alpertovich. A lot of people know, I'm sure Jen, you know as well, the founder of CrowdStrike. Yeah. And somebody I worked with at McAfee, and the person who actually named NightDragon.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you could ask him about NightDragon.
Yes, he named the Operation NightDragon, and incredible human being as well. And we're looking forward to having Dmitry. Jen Easterly, thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to seeing you in California as well. And have yourself a wonderful day. And thank you everybody for joining the session today. Take care of yourself.
Thanks so much, my friend. Okay.
Bye, Jen.
Bye.
Peace. Bye.